What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Unknown Destination, the podcast about anything and everything travel. My name is Justin, and the guy in the green over there, for some reason, we don't know why. Sorry about that, but it is what it is. That is Andrew. How are you doing today?
I'm feeling better. I had some dental work done, so I've been numb pretty much all day. But we are starting the day at 4 p.m. Just a classic. How about yourself?
It's only 3 p.m. here, so, I'm an hour ahead of you.
I'll go by that time.
Yeah. I'm doing pretty well. Still weird job stuff going on, but I'm not going to get into that story because they're waiting. I'm waiting on them to get back to me, and I think they're trying to correct it. So I'm not going to, put things out there on them when I'm going to let them have a chance to fix things.
How very adult of you.
Yeah, sometimes.
We're making progress here.
A little bit.
Maybe the unknown destination is ourselves.
That's too deep for this podcast. So, I guess the first thing that I have this week is I was watching a video on the channel The Planet D. It's a couple of travelers named Dave and Deb. They are from Canada, and they were taking a trip to St. Lucie just recently, a couple weeks ago during COVID-19, and they made a really great video about what to expect when traveling during COVID-19. Now, St. Lucie is one of those islands where as long as you take a test once you're there, you're pretty much free to do everything normally as if COVID didn't exist, which is great.
Florida.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is great. But something that came up in this video is something that we haven't touched on as travel agents in this video, and I think it's something that's important. They mentioned that in Canada, they are able to get a travel insurance that is called Medipack, and it is only available to Canadian travelers. However, their travel insurance does include coverage for COVID-19. Now, that got me thinking that as a travel agent, I've actually never recommended travel insurance to anybody who I've booked a flight for, mostly because, number one, if you're booking with a major credit card, most of the time you're already covered by some sort of their travel insurance anyway. But two, a lot of it is because they don't necessarily cover the things that you need. And looking deeper into it, there's two really major travel companies or travel insurance companies here in the US, and that's Travel Guard, which is owned by AIG, and then there is Allianz. It's the bank, but anyway,
okay.
it's their coverage. But what I thought was interesting is those are really the two main travel insurances available here. Neither one of them actually offer any coverage for anything COVID-19 related because it's considered an epidemic, and epidemics are an exception in their coverage.
That's really American of us.
Uh-huh.
That's bizarre. So that you didn't find any travel insurances that, at least any major ones, that cover it.
Not in the US.
Are the airlines covering anything?
So that does lead me into the airlines are under government order for certain things where they have to issue refunds or they have to not charge change fees up to a certain date. I do need to do a little bit more research into that, but I expect that some of that might be changing soon. So I didn't want to go too deep into it until the end of the year.
Okay.
But as of right now, basically on every airline, if your trip changes due to COVID-19, at the very least, you are able to change your flight without a change fee, which, that's a big advantage, but there's nothing against them charging a fare difference.
Right.
So that's where that gets a little iffy.
Yeah, also not just that, but what happens to you're having to make calls to your hotels, car rentals. I mean, car rentals, anybody that hasn't rented a car before, usually you can get out of renting a car. They don't usually have non-refundable unless you pay like it's very black and white normally when you book a car rental,
Yeah.
whether it's refundable or not. At least on the business side of it, I think you can pretty much always get out of those kind of you wouldn't have to pay anything. But the problem being that you still would need the car for whenever you reschedule and they might not have it. Same thing with a hotel. They may, charge you a fee for rescheduling, even if it is COVID related. So
Yeah.
I would definitely check with wherever you're wanting to stay as well. Maybe speak to a manager if you're not using a travel agent, if you're trying to go to some of these places.
Okay,
And
Karen.
yeah, definitely talk to a manager just to see what their policy is, or if they could. You definitely want to get something like that in writing, where it's you just have them email you what their current policy is on their COVID rebookings, because they want your business as well, so they're probably going to just allow you to rebook, but you don't
Yeah.
want to. You don't want to, I guess, assume that, especially in these times.
And if you're traveling domestically, most hotels, your room is cancelable up until 24 hours before your arrival anyway. So I
Or
would
the
say,
day of.
or even the day of. Yeah, most of the time it's not going to be an issue, but there are certain cities and destinations you got to be careful. A big one for that is Las Vegas. They're known to make it like a week before and charge you a resort fee, even if you cancel it at that point. And so you just got to really watch your bookings. And that's honestly the case when you're booking in Las Vegas. You got to be really careful anyway, because those resort fees add up fast. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I know, Andrew, you haven't necessarily been in a position where you're selling travel insurance to your clients because you've been with agencies where you're doing corporate. And in the corporate world, they basically all have coverage through their credit card companies.
Yeah, they actually, it's quite the opposite. There are quite a few accounts that I've been on. They encourage us to remind the travelers to not buy the optional insurance
Yeah.
because they're doubling up on insurance for no reason. It's just throwing money away. And especially when it comes to car rentals, there's a lot of those because the car rentals, when you go to pick up your car, they don't know if I mean, unless they're really good at their jobs or they have a system in place to recognize it, they don't know if your company covers insurance or not when you're picking up the car. So they're going to offer it to you. And if you're not a savvy traveler, you haven't traveled for business a lot, you'd probably go, well, yeah, I guess like I'll put that on the company card because I'd rather pay the, $10 a day for the insurance as opposed to wrecking this $20,000 car and it's
Right.
on the company's dime.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I will say I did used to sell travel insurance as part of my job doing rewards travel. Uh, with Travel Guard specifically, that was the company that we were partnered with, and it was a metric that I had to make. So why not tell a little story about the story that I used to tell people that I was taught to told people to get it to sell? Um, Now, I will say nothing against Travel Guard, and the story that I'm about to tell to sell it is actually something that they would cover, and it's not something you would think of. So there are situations where you may actually want it. I'm just saying for COVID and for like any illness with a pre-existing condition, it's not going to do you any good. And honestly, if you're working with a travel agent, we're probably going to be able to find a way to work with you anyway.
Wait, so pre-existing conditions are also off of the list. Wow,
For any U.S. travel insurance company that I'm aware of, yeah.
that's insane. I hmm,
Yeah.
interesting. I'm just curious for I'll get a little bit more personal here. So I've got a pre-existing medical condition. So I never knew that with all my traveling that if I got the stomach flu or something, they could try to attribute that to a pre-existing condition to not pay me if they knew about it.
They could.
So that's a
And they would, trust me.
that
Like
that is
they would.
that's pretty scummy. That is kind of the state of the insurance world though in the US.
Yeah. So the story that I used to tell people was one that was told to me that was an experience that a traveler had had and told the agent about. But it was basically travel insurance does cover your car rental, your hotel, it's everything that's involved in the trip. Well, this person had rented a car and drove through the mountains in Colorado. Well, they didn't know that there were a lot of rocks falling in that area and there was a thing out. So a boulder rolled down the side of the mountain and crushed the front of their car. Well, they didn't have the insurance through the car rental agency. So they were freaking out because they were, at this point, they're basically responsible for the cost of the car because they didn't have car insurance through their own insurance that covered rental cars or,
Right.
or the collision damage waiver, but the travel insurance did cover it in that point and they ended up paying nothing out of pocket. So that was my spiel to people. You never know if a boulder's gonna roll down the side of a mountain and crush the front of your car, which works great if you're talking to somebody who's going to a mountainous region. Doesn't work so well if you're trying to sell it to somebody driving through the middle of Kansas. But then I usually just went along with something like, if it was Texas, I'd say tumbleweeds and caused an accident, or if it was Kansas, I'd be like, hey,
You just pick the natural disaster of the location. Yeah.
basically. The thing is, natural disasters are like, that's a listed exclusion as well.
Like a tornado or a hurricane or
Exactly. However, a freak rock falling isn't really
considered a like rock
considered a natural
slide or something.
disaster, right? But yeah, like if your car was destroyed because of a tornado and your luggage was in it and got destroyed and stuff, the travel insurance isn't going to cover you.
See, this is why everyone people ask me, Andrew, why do you pay $300 a year for your credit card? Because because I don't have to deal with this kind of thing. That was actually one of the
Yeah.
reasons. So I had the Chase Sapphire or the
Okay.
Chase Reserve or whatever their low tier, but it's still it's like $70 a year. It's their travel card, but it's their lower grade one. I had that one, and I looked into the different benefits and things. And I noticed that there were a lot less restrictions on the reserve card. Also, whenever I've had to call them for anything while I'm traveling, I get somebody that speaks very, very good English, as well as they're probably the best customer service team I've ever had to deal with. Um, but to my point, I feel like people need to take more advantage of that and know what they have because a lot of people have credit cards already, and there are credit cards that don't have the $300 price tag on them that will still offer you travel insurance. As long as you book with that credit card. So those yearly pamphlets that you get of like your benefits or whatever you get for with your credit cards, make sure that you actually read through them because there's a lot of added bonuses that people don't take advantage of. For example, I get for my the reserve card that I'm talking about, I get a travel credit that is worth basically the entire cost of what it costs per year. So there's no reason if you're ever going to travel. And so Chase is really, really good about what they consider travel or dining. Like they will take um, car rentals off towards this travel credit, hotels. So if you think about it, you stay 2 nights in a hotel and you have a car rental, that's probably your $300 travel credit for the year. And you didn't have to pay for it because you've already paid through your card. Plus, you get all the extra bonuses of extra points per dollar on travel and dining. And it just makes everything go a lot further. So yeah, the $300 price tag per year sounds really terrible. But if you ever have to stay in a hotel or travel for any reason, you're 100% getting it back. The only way you wouldn't get it is if you just did nothing for an entire year.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention that we said we were going to do something about those credit cards, and I still want to do that, but I'm kind of waiting
Yeah.
because things have changed a lot this year, and some benefits have been cut and switched
Yep.
for
They
other
added
stuff.
on some more. Yep.
I,
They
I
just
Yeah, I
go
know
ahead.
they added like DoorDash as a subscription for
Yep.
this year for free and things like that to make up for people not traveling. But some of those biggest things that all of Chase's cards include trip cancellation or trip interruption insurance. So you already have trip insurance as long as you're using your card.
Yep.
The auto rental collision damage waiver. So again, don't get that waiver when you're at the car rental place. It's already included.
Yep.
They have baggage delay insurance, which is actually a crazy good benefit. It's $100 a day for up to 5 days that you
Yep.
can use to go out and buy clothes or toiletries or whatever you need, and Chase will then reimburse you for that.
Yep. If they lose your bags while you're so that way if you end up, you get to India and they lost your bags because for whatever reason, or if it just gets on the wrong plane, which happens frequently because they figure, oh, it's gonna get there, they'll still get it in time. you don't have to worry about that. You've got that $500 to go get a couple pairs of clothes, and you'll be good until basically you get your other things.
Yeah, and then I know they have trip delay reimbursement as well, which that's actually crazy because if your flight's delayed more than 12 hours or requires an overnight stay, you're reimbursed for meals and lodging up to $500 per airline ticket that it's on.
Yep.
That is an insane amount for a 12-hour delay.
I will tell you, I got to use it. I've used that before, and that's another reason why I will stay with Chase probably until the end of days, because of how great and how easy they made the whole transaction. That's if Chase had some kind of um I guess corporate travel agency type thing, more because they're pretty much just a call center, but they hire
Yeah.
probably the best of the best. They must have some pretty good benefits or get paid pretty well, is what I gotta say, because they've got
So,
really good people.
funny part of that, I worked for the company that handled Chase's travel department.
Oh, that's funny.
Uh and they didn't pay well or have good benefits. But but
Sometimes it's environment though too.
it was a fun place to work and they had good training. Now, when I worked there, it wasn't Chase. It actually changed after that to being Chase. I was handling Capital One calls, ironically. Um, but yeah. The other things that Chase has, they don't have blackout dates on their Chase Rewards travel. They have travel accident insurance that includes death and dismemberment coverage up to $500,000. And
Mhm.
this is the biggest one. When a lot of people are looking at credit cards, they're worried about getting points for their particular airline, especially if you have somebody with status that's like an AA Advantage Platinum member. They want the points to go to American because they're trying to get to that million miles so they can fly with
It
the
goes
CEO.
further.
And yeah.
Yeah.
But Chase is one of the only credit card companies that offers one-on-one point transfer
Yep.
to
All the
basically
time.
any any travel loyalty program, whether it's hotel, car rental, airline.
And those two they do specials on. So keep your eyes open for that. They did, I believe last year was Hilton. Like around the holiday season, it was Hilton or Marriott where they would do like instead of 1-to-1 transfers, it was like 3 or 4-to-1. So
That's awesome.
quite a big difference if you're transferring, thousands of points. If you're trying to get that next kind of tier, I guess, upgrade at any of those places.
Yeah, and I know a lot of this is unrelated to what we started talking about, but I think it's something we're both passionate about is to recommending the best products for people to travel, and that's definitely one of them. Obviously, that does rely on you having good enough credit to be able to get approved for a Chase card. The Sapphire Reserve card is going to be a little bit more difficult to get than some of the lower ones. And if your credit's bad, I definitely recommend building it up to try to get there. In that situation, I will say, even though you're not going to get those benefits, American Express has some of the best travel insurance coverage, even on their secured cards. So
Yep.
that may be a place to start.
Yeah, I would say look at the entry level ones that don't cost anything per year to get started. Even if your credit's kind of not on the great side, you can still probably get those. And one that comes to mind, I think my first credit card was the Chase Freedom card. That one's got a pretty low entry level to get a card. Plus, you'll start building that credit with Chase. And they do look at that when you're trying to get another Chase card. It makes it a lot
Yeah.
easier. I think I have 4 credit cards from Chase. Um, Definitely not needed, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
I wanted my Sapphire card. The only other thing I want to touch on before moving away from the credit cards is when it comes to the rental insurance, that does not, no matter what you go with, they will not include U-Hauls. So
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
doing like a rental when it comes to, even if you go with the smallest U-Haul, they will not cover that. So that is one instance where you want to get the insurance from it.
And even in that situation, not that I'm a U-Haul expert because not really a travel company, but people do need to move. Uh, Check with your car insurance company first because there are car rental companies that are not car rental, your actual auto insurance company, because some people's auto insurance policies will cover U-Haul rentals.
Yeah, I just know that mine didn't, and that could have been something that I had selected, or I don't
Yeah.
even remember it being an option. But that, so I go through Progressive, so I did not see an option there. If anybody did see that option and wants to call me out on being wrong, go for it. And I will look for it.
I'm with Geico, so I got no idea. You and Flo over there while I'm partying with the gecko.
Yeah, it honestly it just made it easier because in my area, so Geico doesn't do homeowners insurance.
Gotcha.
So bundle where you can. Another money saving tip. But going back, I did have something I want to touch on about I guess COVID related and airlines, since we kind of went into the insurance side of it, because this kind of relates to that. There was a passenger who reportedly died of COVID yesterday on a flight. Now I'm taking this with a grain of salt because the headline is misspelled. They misspelled reportedly, but they took a compilation of tweets that had happened yesterday, so December the 14th, on a flight that a gentleman had died. They had tried to reroute. The flight was going. It was an LA based flight, and it was. I'm sorry. It was from Orlando to LA with a stop in New Orleans. Now this flight, apparently they're saying that it's COVID related because the wife of the gentleman who passed tested positive upon landing. Now people were pretty outraged because apparently when they stopped and dropped off the wife and her past husband, they just took off again. Same plane, so contaminated plane by all accounts, because she tested positive. So whether it was a COVID related death or not, there's a couple Twitter users who were absolutely losing their mind because they were just getting ready to take off, and it looks like it was United Airlines had a spokesperson say that it was United Flight 591 from Orlando to LA was diverted to New Orleans last night due to a medical emergency. Paramedics boarded the aircraft upon landing in New Orleans, and the passenger was taken to a local hospital. So I'm assuming that he had passed after. He was probably unconscious on the flight. There's very little detail about this right now.
Where did you find this story? I have not. I can't find it anywhere, and I'm suspicious because of the misspelling. But I do have a story where I know for a fact it actually happened that we can go over in a second.
So this was on so the source from this is View from the Wing, which I have never heard of this this travel. It's a View from the Wing, thought leader in travel. And the person who wrote it is Gary Leff. Frequent business travel. Experts in the field of miles, points, and frequent business travel, topic he's covered since 2002. Co-founder of Frequent Flyer Community, InsideFlyer.com.
He's also predicting that a U.S. major airline will predict bankruptcy in 2021 and two smaller airlines will merge, and that's just like his thought.
His hot take.
Yeah.
This one. So the Twitter user, it was Joe LaFlame. That's the person. It's at Job REAUXX.
Okay.
And she had tweeted probably like 4 or 5 times about what was going on. And I mean, I guess with it having a United spokesperson, something definitely happened in this flight, but it doesn't seem. I guess they're still waiting on the response from United to combat this Twitter post about them using the same flight. It seems like something really bizarre that it seems like it would be hard. I don't know. It's kind of like you believe the Twitter user at that point. Just not, and I know you're laughing because it's United, but it just seems
I'm also
like
laughing just because
to make up.
I can't see
like an airline using the same flight, but then I can't see somebody tweeting.
Oh no, I can see that happening. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, instead of like, yeah.
I'm surprised I can't find the story anywhere else. That's all. And I don't even see a story about somebody dying on an airplane recently. But
well, it could be because they didn't die necessarily on the aircraft.
Well,
from what it sounds like.
well, let's talk about somebody who did then.
Okay.
So a Spirit Airlines flight
I did
back
see
in
that one.
July.
Yep.
Yeah. So this was a flight back in July. A 38-year-old woman who had asthma was traveling to Vegas or from Vegas to Dallas on Spirit Flight 208 on July 24th when she had difficulty breathing. She was given an inhaler and was given oxygen, but that didn't work. They diverted the plane to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where medics attempted to revive her on the boarding bridge, but she was pronounced dead at the airport. Most likely, unfortunately, she was probably actually already dead while they were trying to resuscitate her, getting her off the aircraft. The interesting thing about this, though, is that she had tested positive 2 days before for coronavirus, and that information was not fed back to any other passengers, including the ones that were sitting near her on the aircraft.
Mhm.
What's interesting is we hadn't necessarily covered this story yet, but this story is actually from November 2nd, and the flight was back on July 24th. So somehow this has stayed out of like the big mainstream media.
Yeah, because I had
Uh,
not heard of it until today.
Ironically, the sites that I'm finding it on are UK news sites.
Ah, that's concerning.
Yeah, but it definitely happened. There's documentation. It's just
You know,
they
I
interpreted it as asthma as opposed to COVID, but she had tested positive for COVID.
and I touched on this last week about our news and trusting foreign news over our own. This is
Yeah.
another prime example of the rest of the world seeing what we are not. Not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but um, that it definitely seems like something's going on with our media lately.
Yeah, and there are US sites that have it. It looks like the Washington Post and USA Today did both cover the story, and actually USA Today had the first coverage of it on October 21st.
That's
Uh,
still you're thinking 4 months afterwards,
yeah, and that's it. I mean, everything else is a local news station. There's no
huh?
CNN, there's no Fox News, there's no
No MSNB,
CNBC, no
yeah,
MSNBC. So
that's bizarre.
it's definitely suspicious.
We need to do a segment called "Spooky Happenings That Have Been Covered Up." We'll just do a
And
quick segment on it.
I think something else I need to say is I am definitely not laughing because this woman lost her life. Obviously, our thoughts are with her and her family and everybody, honestly, on that flight, because who knows who got sick from it. But
Right.
it's just a crazy situation that we're just finding this. Andrew's finding a story that I can't find anything else on. But until we know for sure, we don't know if it's true or not. And we don't know if we can trust the media to compare it to.
Yeah, and that's especially when it comes like with a headline that is very sensationalized
Yeah.
to try to get a response. You can tell that it was written very, very quickly to try to be probably one of the first. Um, I don't know how, as a co-founder of an organization, you spell reportedly wrong twice. But I guess it is what it is. We'll take it for what it is. Maybe we'll hear about this in 4 more months in real news. Who knows?
That's the thing. I mean, why did that story from July not get covered until October? What was going wrong? Why am I not surprised it was on Spirit?
You know what I'm thinking too is that it may have taken so long to come out because they wanted to rule out medically, like because obviously with COVID being such a big deal, they don't want it. They don't want to do a false narrative about the situation.
Yeah,
She could have had an asthma attack, and COVID is at like exasperates breathing
right.
conditions. So
I have asthma too. That's the biggest reason I'm terrified of contracting COVID.
doing anything, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's we'll go to a little bit more uplifting news.
Okay.
Since we know that I love keeping track of the UK for some reason, and what's going on at Gatwick.
Oh.
Um,
Sorry.
and Qatar is going to be returning to Gatwick,
Okay.
which is very big news for London, obviously the UK, because Qatar coming back means that is a gateway opening to many, many destinations that they could not get to otherwise.
Now, was Qatar flying into Heathrow before?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah, they were flying. I believe they're still flying into. No, they're basically coming back into Heathrow as well.
Okay.
Scheduled for 4 daily flights from Heathrow, 3 daily flights from Manchester, and 3 from Edinburgh throughout December. So returning to 3 weekly flights from Gatwick is big. It basically means that they've got their gateways back. To if so, those of you that aren't familiar with Qatar and kind of like their zones of where you would be flying to, that's opening up like Africa, Asia, and the Middle East.
Yeah.
So, but of course, if you're opening that up, then you can always transfer over to another One World Alliance on the same ticket and get pretty much anywhere in the world. So that's pretty good news. That it just kind of shows that the UK travel market is kind of resilient in a way that all of this crazy stuff's been happening and they're still shutting down, but the airlines still have faith in their travel community. So I don't know. I
Nice.
like to see that.
Awesome. So let's keep it international. In other kind of positive and uplifting news, I'm sure a lot of you saw the news that New Zealand has officially declared themselves virus free. They have no cases in the country yet again. It's happened once before, I believe, earlier this year,
Yep.
and then they kind of had a second wave of a whole 12 people.
Yep.
However, Australia and New Zealand have agreed to do a testing free, quarantine free, or at least a quarantine free. What word am I looking for? Travel bubble.
Yep. And you had brought that up a couple months ago when they had first talked about it.
Yeah, it's ironic. It had just started a couple months ago, and then we were gone for a week. We were back the next week, and guess what? It was not happening because
unheard of. No more news on it. Acted like it never happened.
Yeah, so there is a certain circumstance that this requires before it can actually happen. Australia does have to go 28 consecutive days without community transition. As long as that happens and Australia's cabinet approves it, this will happen. Their goal is to name a date in the new year once remaining details are locked down. So most likely we'll be seeing that travel bubble open up around January, sometime mid-January.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's going to be the biggest way to get travel happening again on an international level is by doing these bubbles to kind of get people moving again. And then just from there, hopefully, the US, Europe, we can kind of get the virus under control so that we can participate.
Right. So yeah, on top of that, just a little bit of going back a little grim, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing unless you work in the industry. AAA put out their report on holiday expectations and how many people they were expecting to travel. They expect 30% fewer travelers between December 23rd and January 3rd due to COVID-19 concerns. I honestly think that's a positive thing. They're expecting less people to try to travel, which is a good thing because, obviously we need that to happen. We're seeing transmission around the holidays because people aren't doing that.
Yep.
So yeah, that's about it for that. But then obviously the other big thing that we haven't said, which is the biggest news, is vaccinations have begun with Pfizer and BioNTech's vaccine. First in the UK and now here in the US and even here in St. Louis yesterday. Andrew, you have the great honor of living in the state where the vaccines are coming from.
Woo!
Yeah, they probably didn't keep any there for you though, so I'm sorry.
No, they kept like a few,
Like
not
four?
enough, not like enough for a significant majority of the population. But I do think that getting the medical staff and the first responders, like the police department, that kind of thing, I think getting those people vaccinated first, it just makes more sense because then they're not able to be spreading it or they're not getting wiped out for weeks upon it just makes sense. The only thing that is just kind of in the back of my mind is if something goes wrong, we're gonna have no police and no doctors or nurses.
That's disconcerting.
Yeah, but that's just how my brain works. It's been a long year. I think that's definitely not very likely. That's probably the least likely scenario, especially with how confident everyone is about this vaccine. I was watching an interview with it was one of the generals and he was saying that they would be more than happy to do it live on TV for people that were feeling concerned about the vaccine, that him and his staff would personally do it. So you're looking at 4 and 5-star generals that are willing to do it first. So
Yeah, and you have every ex-US president that's still living has said they're more than willing to get the vaccine in public. Honestly, the only president that's living that we haven't heard say they would take it is Trump, and he did say he'd be willing to take it. He just wants to let frontline workers get it and first and whatnot. And
which
honestly, he's
actually
had COVID.
I was okay with
So
that response. That was one of the things that I was like, you know what, that was the first thing that he said in quite a while that I've been like, you know what, that makes sense. But
uh-oh,
the
we're getting
fact that
political.
the fact that I don't think that we should be giving our senators it first. I don't think that they're frontline people. But you know,
Yeah, the only reason I can see senators getting it is because if it does increase people's trust in the virus to see public figures receiving it,
that's
I
true.
understand that. And they need to pass some stimulus legislation.
All
So
right. So anyway, back to I'm gonna jump right back into international good news. So Avinor, which I don't know if you're familiar with that name.
not
It's the airport company in Norway.
okay.
They're looking for partners to kind of launch this duty free um kind of like travel value contract at 11 Norwegian airports. So probably most of them. They're looking for people to partner into that because they estimate the total value of this contract around 3 billion euros. So a substantial amount for like a airport travel industry in Norway. And this would be from 2023 to 2027.
Okay.
So they're kind of giving some leeway in kind of ironing out the details, it looks like. But the duty free, they want to kind of retain that in post pandemic world, because with they're thinking that a lot of airports are going to be raising costs of duty free things to kind
Yeah.
of make up for loss of revenue. Um, and
As
they're
if
trying
they
to
aren't already crazy expensive.
right, exactly. And they're trying to avoid that because they think that if they can keep things how they are right now, more people are going to be buying the duty free things, because when people first come back to travel, it's going to be more about value and just getting out. They're not going to care so much about the duty free items that you normally would. So something to keep an eye on to see if other airports kind of do the same thing, as opposed to trying to, excuse me, nickel and dime the traveling people, because I think that they're onto something with this, that people aren't going to be using their money when they do start traveling again to
Yeah,
buy this duty free vodka and the stuff that you would normally buy to bring back. I don't see that being a huge seller.
I don't either.
Um, so that's kind of, I guess that's one of the things that just kind of keep our eyes on to see if other people start doing and duty free is just the tax free things if people aren't accustomed with that term.
Yeah. You'll always find the duty free shops past security. That's also another benefit to them. They do sometimes have like Andrew mentioned, like you can't get a fifth of alcohol and carry it through security, but
Right.
you can buy it once you're past security. So that's another benefit to the duty free shops.
Yep.
Um, all right, so let's talk about something a little weird.
All right.
So this past Saturday afternoon, Las Vegas police actually had to arrest a man that decided it would be fun to go walk on on the wing of an Alaska Airlines flight.
People are getting bored. I swear.
Yeah, it was a 45-minute incident. It was caught on video by people that were on the flight going to Portland. Really not much more information than they arrested the guy and he basically committed a federal crime, but I felt like it had to be mentioned because it was weird.
Yeah, that sounds like something like that's Florida news right there. It's just that it's a Florida man that was stuck in Vegas.
Let's see.
I do have another thing that is something that we're gonna probably want to keep an eye on, because anybody that travels know that you can only look so many months out for flights.
Right.
EasyJet just put their winter of 2022 flights on sale. So over a year.
Wow.
So this is huge because this is giving people the chance to book early, obviously make savings on winter holiday flights because those are the ones that sell out. And they charge an arm and a leg if you're trying to book that within, probably like a 4-week or 6-week time frame. So they added over 36 million seats and 200,000 flights.
This is very, very smart on EasyJet's part. If they can bring in revenue for flights that aren't happening for 2 years, then they're not affecting their 2021 revenue, but they're making extra revenue for 2020 to make up for losses. So that's
Exactly
brilliant. Now, the one thing I will say as a travel agent is even if you book it now, expect changes to your flight multiple times before it actually takes off.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a huge disclaimer that we need to let people know that with this being 2 years out, you're looking at schedule changes up the wazoo. You're probably gonna be getting tons of emails because they're not gonna even kind of finalize their flight times until probably a few months in advance. But that is saying, I'm curious to see if other airlines do this, because this is kind of a survive the pandemic type of thing where they're trying to get that money now.
I'm curious if it's as easy to do in the US as it is in the UK. And the reason I say that is with them having to report their flight plans to the FAA here, I just wonder if the FAA is going to be as easy to work with, or if EasyJet's just putting it out there like, hey, this is the flight time we're going to try to get approved.
That's true.
It just depends on regulations, and that's something that neither one of us are experts on as far as the regulations of flight plans. That's more, it'd be an airline employee, and honestly probably more a pilot that would know that than we would.
Yeah, and it looks like they've got some features in there where you can look at the 2021 holiday plans, like if you wanted to do some kind of like getaway resort destination. So you can use that as kind of a guideline for the 2022. They won't have the packages built in yet because it's 2 years out. But you can kind of use the 2021 as a guideline because it's showing that they don't change that very often with the destinations.
Yeah, and I was just looking it up. Now, I don't know if there's regulation because of it or for this, but in the US with the major carriers, Alaska, American, Delta, basically all the major carriers, 331 days. So not even a full year is as far out as you can currently book a flight with them. So it'll be interesting to see what happens going 600. Forward. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it says that use the 2021 holiday plans. You can look at the hot spots like the Canary Islands or Amsterdam, all those kind of things to get your 2022 kind of planned out. So nice. Yeah, I thought that was very interesting to see. You never see 2 years out.
And that's the thing for you countries who have gotten a stimulus package, other than the one, and those of you that have money from stimulus packages, there's something great to use it on. Support the airline, get a flight booked for less money than you'd normally spend, and plan a trip that you're going to take in 2 years.
Yeah, and it does say that they're I haven't looked at all the details of how flexible, but I'm assuming it's very flexible with being able to change. You're probably just going to be looking at a fare difference again. But if that's the case, I mean, you would be paying. The thing about fare difference that people don't understand is you'd be paying that regardless.
Right.
And that's a huge thing that it's kind of a difficult concept that, you already have a ticket, but you paid, say $100 for the ticket, but you want to go somewhere new on a different day. It's $300 more than that ticket. So you may not have a change fee, but you're going to have to pay what the actual ticket would cost.
So thank you for that transition, because we're going to go back to something we kind of discussed earlier. We discussed change fees and things on tickets and travel insurance, but as of yesterday, United United has joined carriers that include Delta, American, and Alaska in eliminating change fees on all international tickets, including basic economy, through March 31st of 2021. So that's another basically 3-month extension. That's a big deal.
You said that was on basic economy?
All flights, including basic economy, which basic economy is normally so restricted you can't change it even if you pay a change fee. So that's
what we would
a
call
big deal.
Throwaway ticket.
Yeah, and these are international flights that we're talking about on these airlines, so those could be anywhere from $100 to $500 in change fees. So big deal there. Honestly, a great response, and it doesn't look like that was necessarily forced by the government. So a little bit of props to these airlines, including United, for doing this to help reaccommodate their passengers.
Yeah, that's definitely some good news. I was just kind of glancing over. I had an article pulled up here that I'm hesitant to even talk about just because it seems very like everybody's kind of doing hot takes right now. And this one is that the title is 50% of airlines could disappear within 3 years, which this is under the assumption that they're saying that it's going to take 3 years to get back to kind of where travel was pre-pandemic,
Yeah.
which most experts are saying it's probably going to be 2 years, 2 to 3 years before we get up to that. But then at the 3 year mark, they're saying at least most trusted travel experts are saying that in the 3 year mark, we're going to be higher than we were pre-COVID. So the graph that I had looked at, it was they think for 2021 it was supposed to be like 50% of what it 50% more of what it was this year, and then 2022 was going to be 70 to 80% to what we were normal, and then 2023 we were supposed to be at like 120. So but they're just saying at this rate, because of the air traffic coming back so slow, they think that 50% of airlines will go bankrupt within 3 years.
Wow.
And with that being said, that doesn't necessarily mean that those airlines are going to be gone. We've seen companies go bankrupt. That doesn't mean that they disappear necessarily.
No.
It just means that their finances, they kind of have to look for investors. There's a whole process into going bankrupt. With that being said, Kayak, the website Kayak has added in a train section,
Oh,
which they did not have before, and so now they can find train and bus tickets referenced by the platform combo. So they partnered with a kind of a bus train platform to be able to make it happen.
cool. That's awesome. Train travel is something we don't discuss that much, and it's something I'd like to focus on a little bit more in the future because, uh, especially if you're in Europe and traveling domestically within Europe, or if you're in the US traveling domestically within the US, there's a lot of really gorgeous train trips. I will say rail service in Europe does tend to actually be a little bit better than rail service in the US because it's just utilized more often.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of their main transport. Whereas in the US, it's kind of like a sightseeing thing, or if you don't want to take your car somewhere.
Yeah, the only exception to that really is the Northeast and people that live in like the Pennsylvania, New York, Boston area because they use
Oh
them as
yeah,
commuter
DC.
trains. But
Yeah, people that commute to DC.
yeah, uh,
Um, the last thing I had was just the appointment of the Department of Transit, the how Biden selected Buttigieg, because that's kind of still relevant to us, just to kind of keep an
yeah,
eye on, just to see if anything is put into place with that new appointment. Probably, I don't foresee very much changing right
I don't
now,
either.
because I think that a lot of these new appointments into political offices are going to be very, very hesitant to make big changes right now,
Yeah,
because if it goes south, it's going to be on them.
and I don't expect you to see the U.S. government spending a lot more money. However, since we went into it, there is a update on stimulus, and it does directly relate to airlines.
Okay.
It hasn't passed yet. Currently, the leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, is meeting with the leader of the House, Nancy Pelosi, obviously Republican and Democrat, to work on a COVID relief package. The package that they're looking at is $748 billion. But the most important thing in the travel world is that includes $25 billion that goes towards transportation. That money is set to be split up between buses like Greyhound and things like that, Amtrak, and the airlines. At one point, actually, I want to say it may be 45 billion. Yeah, it's 45. At one point, the airlines were separated out of that and having things completely on their own. Now it's kind of all lumped together, but definitely looks like there is going to be a little bit of a break, and hopefully, we'll see that in preventing more layoffs within the airlines.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely not a bad thing, I don't think, if
No,
if everything goes through as it should. I know that There have been a lot of agencies and corporations in the travel world and hotel lines that have been kind of crying out for some kind of relief because a lot of them were lost in, I guess, everything else that was going on. Some of these places fell through the cracks that I guess really nobody thought about until it was too late.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the last thing I had for this episode.
Okay, that's the only other thing I had was I just wanted to touch on cruises, because
I did see that.
we've got a that they expect to contain COVID, not eliminate it. Was the headline. This was part of Travel Weekly's article that they had written on it, and just because there have been some pretty serious outbreaks on cruise ships, so a lot of people have been very hesitant to going out. Obviously, the most famous on the Diamond Princess, before anybody knew what COVID-19 was, and it resulted in passenger deaths. I went to school with a girl who was on the cruise ship when they were quarantined over there, and she was sending pictures. It looked like they had them in jails. It literally looked like prisons.
Wow.
So obviously they didn't know what to do in the beginning or what COVID was. So they just kind of had them quarantined like you would quarantine any kind of contagion. Did not look fun. But it looks like people are not understanding that just because they're doing all the things right doesn't mean that there's a 0% chance that you're gonna get COVID or you're gonna run into that on a ship. They are saying that if they do find that someone has COVID, after they've already departed, that they do have certain places on the ship that obviously are not like a prison, but they can quarantine people until they reach port or until the cruise is done, those kind of things. So to not necessarily freak out, I think they're trying to keep people from panicking and trying to keep the cruise industry going. We talked on a previous episode about kind of cruises and how I had received something from Viking that they weren't even going to be basically doing anything for 2021, and they already had booking people out for 2022, which kind of what we saw with EasyJet, trying to keep the cash flow coming in while they're trying to figure out what they're going to do.
Yeah, and I think just to touch on that a little bit more, as of right now, as far as these three major operators, Royal Caribbean and Norwegian have both said that all voyages through February 28th have been canceled. Their goal is to start February 28th. However, Royal Caribbean has said it may be further out. Carnival said their first cruises are going to be from Miami and Port Canaveral in Florida. However, the CEO came out last week and said he thinks it's going to take longer for them to get back to actually sailing than he originally expected. Their goal was actually to start sailing at some point by the end of this year. Obviously, that's not going to happen, and now it seems like it may get pushed back from that February date, honestly, for all of these cruise lines.
Yeah, I think that we're going to be seeing that. A lot of 2021 is going to be a lot of booking trips for 2022, unfortunately, just because of the realistic nature of how long it's going to take for the vaccination to hit the public on a large scale. I think that it's going to just be more realistic to look towards 2022. At least for personal travel. I do think that it's going to be easier for business travelers because there's a lot of things that are already in place with the airlines, so that they're doing the rapid testings between locations. Plus, a lot of the destinations are opening back up that would be more business oriented. So I think as soon as we get those routes back open, the U.S. to China, U.S. to Japan, U.S. to Germany. Once those kind of have the rapid testings, I think that corporate travel will start picking up again.
I would agree, and I think vaccines matter a lot in this situation too. Obviously, right now we're just kind of seeing frontline workers getting vaccinated. The expectation is for that really to ramp up in March. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, in the U.S., we're going to have a new president by that point, and that could change a lot of things. So
yeah, who knows what's going to be happening at that point?
But yeah, anyway, that's all I have for this week. So I want to thank you guys for listening. For those of you that this is the first time you've listened to the podcast, thank you very much for listening. I know I rebranded my own personal YouTube channel because this is something I'm really passionate about and I kind of wanted to switch it over. So a lot of you are coming from videos that may have been more about budget and saving money and shopping clearance. And I still want to include things like that for you. I think traveling on a budget is definitely possible, and it's definitely something that as travel industry professionals we can teach you. So I hope you stay subscribed. I hope you share this video, have your friends like and subscribe. Obviously you can always find the podcast on all major platforms where podcasts are, which include Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, wherever else. If you have a question for us, leave it in a comment down below or go to the Anchor site and leave it in a voice message. And yeah, I think that's all I got.
Yeah, I think that was a good place to wrap it up. And just a reminder that later this week, when we do our second episode of the week, I will be having a kind of a travel destination in a post-COVID world. I've gotten a couple of recommendations from people that have listened to the podcast and where they would like to go when COVID's done. So I think I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to do a more budget-friendly, as well as maybe if you wanted to splurge on a couple things while you're there. So look for that on our next episode here. We'll probably do that more at the end. Um, but from Justin and myself, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time on Unknown Destination.
See you guys later.